Hello folks, welcome to this lecture on parenting styles and discipline techniques. We'll start with parenting styles, and this is the work of Dinah Baumrein from 1971. In her research, she discovered that basically there are four parenting styles, and the four parenting styles are explained along the two dimensions of control and warmth and responsiveness. When we say control, we're talking about essentially discipline, firmness, their use of power. Warmth and responsiveness is basically sensitivity, being sensitive to the child's feelings and what the child's going through, and how quickly they respond and how appropriately they respond. So essentially, control is discipline and behavior. Warmth is, and responsiveness is relationship and sensitivity. Okay, so these are the four parenting styles: authoritarian, authoritative, indulgent-permissive, and indifferent-uninvolved. Okay, so authoritarian parenting. What's your best guess? High or low control, high or low warmth and responsiveness? And the answer is high control and low warmth. So these authoritarian parents have high control. They're very much into the discipline, low warmth and responsiveness. They aren't very sensitive. This parenting style focuses on control, as these parents lay down the law and expect their children to follow them without discussion. These parents wish to cultivate in their children hard work, response, and obedience. Keep that part in mind. That's going to come in very important later, that these parents wish to cultivate in their children the values of hard work, respect, and obedience. Authoritarian parenting tends to be a punishment-heavy parenting style. Children with authoritarian parents typically have lower grades in school, lower self-esteem, and less social skills. Let's stop and think about this for a moment, because it makes perfectly good sense. Authoritarian parents, their children may have lower grades in school. One of the reasons is children kind of get back at their parents through grades. Authoritarian parenting, grades are very, very important. And it's not, since the child's not important because there's low warmth and responsiveness, the children tend to resent the grades and the pressure that they're getting in school. So it becomes counterproductive as they let their grades slip. They have lower self-esteem. One of the comments the authoritarian parent makes is, you can do better. I know you can do better. You got a B is okay, but I know you can do an A, and A is what you can do. So the child kind of gets the message that their best is not good enough, which, as you can see, would lead to lower self-esteem. Less social skills. Well, with the high control, authoritarian parents don't allow their children the social experiences that other children get. And so as a result, they just don't develop socially as well as other children. Okay, what would authoritarian parents do over a bad report card? Well, they would punish without listening to the child's explanation. Remember, that is what authoritarian parents do. They, for instance, they care very much about grades. And so when something happens, they just focus on the behavior. They don't focus on what's going on with the child because they have low warmth and responsiveness. So they're not even going to listen to what the child might have to say. But this is the important part. You have to be careful with authoritarian parenting. The way it's described, you picture them as like little Hitlers, but they're not that way. Remember, I said that they're very focused on developing a good work ethic and listening and being obedient and respecting authority. Authoritarian parents want what's best for their children, and in their view, having a good, strong work ethic, having good grades, practicing hard, that's what is success in life. And so they're so focused on their children doing well and having success that they sacrifice the relationship. And so therefore, they are very loving. they love their children. In fact, they often get very frustrated because they don't understand what's going on. They're doing all this for the kid, and the kid seems to resent them. It's very, very common. But the reason why the resentment is there is because the child actually is feeling neglected. They're feeling that, my grades are more important than me. Me being the star football player or trying to be the star football player is more important than what's going on in my life. So that's why they become resentful. But these parents aren't little Hitlers. They appear to be very, very loving, and they are very loving. They're just kind of misguided by focusing too much on the success that they want for their children instead of the relationship. Okay, so let's move on to authoritative parenting. What's your best guess? High or low control, high or low warmth and responsiveness? And the answer is fair control, high warmth and responsiveness. That fair control is a little confusing. It actually should be high control, but when you say high control, it kind of gives the impression of like the authoritarian parent that they're way up there with control. They're over focused on discipline. The authoritarian parent has high control, but it's fair control because it's mediated or balanced with the high warmth and responsiveness. So an authoritarian parent has, control discipline is very important to them. But the difference is, and this is what makes it fair, is that they listen to the child. They take the whole picture into account. They want their child to be as successful as authoritarian parents do. However, once again, the big difference is the high warmth and responsiveness. Okay, so authoritative parenting, they use a fair amount of control as they put high demands on their children. Yet the parents balance this with being child-centered and respectful of their children's thoughts, feelings, participation, and decision-making. So once again, these parents also put high demands on their children, but balance it by being, as it says here, child-centered. Authoritative parents will set clear standards for their children, monitor the limits that they set, and allow the children to develop autonomy. So in other words, authoritative parents, this part's important, they set clear standards. It's not fuzzy, but it's quite clear. And then they monitor the standards that they set. They keep paying attention to the child and making sure they're staying within their boundaries. Why? Because once again, they have high warmth and responsiveness. Punishments for misbehavior are measured and consistent, not arbitrary and harsh. So because of its fair control, authoritative parents, they tend not to overreact very much. They'll get angry and frustrated, but yet they will keep their calm. They don't deal out harsh punishments and they later feel guilty about it. The punishments are probably already set in place. If you do this, this will happen. And so usually they're already measured out and predicted. So, children with authoritative parents tend to have higher grades, be more responsible, be more self-reliant, be friendly. And this is simply because this is the best combination of fair control, high warmth, and responsiveness. So the child knows that grades are important, but also that they too are important. This leads them to be more responsible, more self-reliant. They're friendlier because they also have a fair amount of social interaction. I just think it's ironic that this is what the authoritarian parents wish for their children as well. However, the authoritarian parents are going about it the wrong way. Okay, so what would an authoritative parent do over a bad report card? They would still give punishments, but would take into consideration the child's side of the story. So in other words, they still will punish if it's a bad report card, but the difference is that they're going to listen to the child's story and maybe or maybe not adjust the consequences. Just because they listen to the child's story doesn't mean that they're going to always believe the child and always adapt the consequences. Sometimes, they're going to listen to the story and say, well, I can understand your point of view, but that point of view is not really cutting it, and the consequences, going to stay the same. Okay, then we have indulgent-permissive parenting. This one should be pretty easy. What's your guess? High or low control and high or low warmth and responsiveness? And the answer is low control, high warmth and responsiveness. So these parents focus so much on the warmth and responsiveness, essentially the relationship that they have for the child, that they don't set limits for their children. As a result of this, the decision making is left almost totally up to the child. So indulgent permissive parents, we really do a flip-flop here. They put so much focus on the relationship. They want what I call the warm and fuzzies from their children so much that they sacrifice control. Because when you think about it, I can't discipline my child and expect to get warm and fuzzies. So therefore, since I am so dependent on the warm and fuzzies, I sacrifice the discipline, control. Permissive parents also tend to give their children whatever they want and hope that they are appreciated for their accommodating style. You're going to see a good example of that in the clip coming up. The mother does a lot because she wants to be appreciated by her daughter. She wants those warm fuzzies. Some permissive parents give their child what they want to be accommodating, but other types of permissive parents compensate for what they've missed as a child, and as a result probably give them too much freedom or materials they lacked during their childhood. So sometimes a permissive parenting isn't so much that I'm so dependent on the warm fuzzies, but it's more that they remember what it was like when they were a kid and how they had nothing, and so the parent being high in warmth and responsiveness, since they had nothing, they want to give their child everything, and so that's quite common also. Okay, so children with indulgent permissive parents have lower grades, are often impulsive, and easily frustrated. Once again, all this makes sense when you consider the dynamics of this parenting style. They have lower grades because for two reasons. Well, the big reason is that they're not being, and rules aren't enforced to get good grades. Good grades aren't really held to high standards, so why should the child try so hard? They're not going to get disciplined for lower grades, so why not? They're often impulsive and easily frustrated. This makes a lot of sense. These kids are essentially used to getting what they want when they want it. So they're impulsive because they're used to, they don't understand the word no, and so they just take. They think that's the way it is. They're easily frustrated because they're used to getting their way, and so if something becomes too hard, they're not getting their way, they're more likely to give up, especially since if they give up, there's not really many consequences for that. Okay, what would indulgent permissive parents do over a bad report card? The answer is, these parents would believe the child's explanation, thus punishment would be minimal, if at all. So in other words, if a child brings home a bad report card, the child's likely to have an excuse. One of the biggest excuses, and I'm not saying that if your child says this is an excuse, but the teacher doesn't like me. And it could be like, this class is too hard and the teacher doesn't give me enough attention, the teacher refuses to help me. Often the children of indulgent permissive parents, they don't take responsibility, they project the responsibility onto other authority figures. So as a result, parents tend to listen to the child's explanation and forego discipline or punishment. Indifferent-uninvolved parenting. So this one should be pretty easy too. You think it's high or low control or high warmth and responsiveness? I don't know about you, but my children love to ride alligators. Okay, so indifferent-uninvolved parenting. It's low control, low warmth and responsiveness. These parents provide for basic needs but little else. Indifferent-uninvolved parents can stem from a variety of reasons. One reason is that the parents prioritize their own happiness over the children's. They're pretty self-centered. They don't really think about their children. But other things such as financial stress or a lack of support, sometimes indifferent, uninvolved parents are, just doing all they can. They could be working 2 jobs. They're really stressed out because even with the 2 jobs, they're still not making the bill because, kids are expensive. And so they just don't have enough time to focus on their children. And another reason would be like a drug addiction or alcoholism, where the drug and alcohol is more important than the children. Children with indifferent, uninvolved parents usually have low self-esteem, are impulsive, are aggressive, are moody. This, once again, makes perfect sense when you think about the dynamics of this parenting style. Lower self-esteem, essentially the parents are giving the child the message, you're not important. So obviously that would affect their low self-esteem. They're often impulsive because, just like we saw with the permissive type parenting, if there's no consequences, I'm used to getting what I want when I want it, so why not? They're aggressive. So here you see a little bit of a difference. When these children say no, they don't know how to handle no, and they, rather than get aggressive, rather than get frustrated, they tend to get aggressive. And that's probably a result of, since they have no relations, they don't have a good relationship with their children or with their parents, these children can be aggressive and there's really no consequences to it. It's not like their parents are going to be disappointed with them if they get aggressive. Moody, the low self-esteem and aggressiveness is going to lead to moodiness as well. So those dynamics make a lot of sense. So what would indifferent, uninvolved parents do over a bad report card? These parents would be basically unaware that report cards were even out. They're indifferent, uninvolved, so they're not going to track report cards. So now that I'm at the end of these examples with report cards, just to kind of put things into perspective, when I'm working with a family, one thing I might ask the family, in fact I do ask the family, so when's report cards coming out? If it's indifferent, uninvolved parents, they won't know when report cards are coming out. When they're permissive parents, they'll have an idea, but you can tell that it's not a big deal to them. I think in a few weeks. Authoritarian parents, they will know exactly when the report cards are coming out, and a lot of times they'll even have some type of a mechanism. They're supposed to set it on my desk as soon as they get home. Authoritative parents, when I ask them that question, they have a pretty good idea. Not the exact day, but they're aware that when the report card will be due. So just a little insight there. Okay, so let's talk about some commonalities of parenting styles. It is common for parents to have different parenting styles. So it's not uncommon for dad to have one parenting style and a mother to have another parenting style. It's so common that, for example, we know which parent to go to for different situations. Go to mom to ask for money, but maybe go to dad if I want to stay out a little bit later. So that's not uncommon to have 2 different parenting styles. It is common for parents to use different parenting styles in different situations. Like, for instance, I'm an authoritative parent, yet when I watch a Gator game, I become the undifferentiated, uninvolved parent. It's like, what? I'm watching a game. Are you bleeding? Is the bleeding getting on anything? Okay, you'll be fine. That's my example of indifferent, uninvolved in watching a Gator game. A mother may be authoritarian over dating, but indulgent, permissive over grades. So it's not uncommon for parents to have different parenting styles in different situations. In this, I'd like to point out the balance. You see, what tends to happen is that as long as there's a balance, so say that the mother is authoritarian over dating, well, maybe the dad is a little bit more permissive over dating, and so they have 2 different parenting styles, but together they kind of balance out. And as long as they talk and don't let the child, what we call mom and pop, too often, as long as the parents communicate and work it out, okay, I'll say okay that she can go out with this guy, but she has to be in early. Okay, that makes sense. So as long as parents are talking, everything balances out, and that's pretty much how it really actually happens. It's common also to have different parenting styles between siblings. So for my oldest boy, I might be more authoritative. With my younger girl, I might have to be more authoritarian. It's important that parents adapt their parenting style to meet the needs of the child's personality. So when siblings have different personalities, this is going to require different parenting styles. So good parenting matches the parenting style to the child's personality. However, keep in mind, there's still going to be some variations in that. So, with my son, I might, because of his history, I might be more authoritarian with his grades. With my daughter, overall, I'm more authoritative. But when it comes to her grades, I'm more indulgent-permissive because say that she's really responsible, and so I don't have to worry about it. My son might be less responsible when it comes to grades. So overall, once again, we're talking that balance. Okay, so overall, having different parenting styles between parents for different situations and for different siblings is fine. That's not the issue. Consistency is the issue. Overall in parenting styles, consistency is the issue. The child needs predictability in his or her environment, thus knowing when and which parent to go over certain situations and be able to predict that parent's reaction is consistency. So some examples of inconsistency is the child is surprised because my usually permissive parent said no, and that's frustrating. Or my usually authoritative parent becomes harsh and dismissive. When you think about it, we kind of know how our parents are going to respond, and when they don't respond that way, that's some inconsistency, and that really creates a lot of friction. So consistency, very, very important in parenting styles. Okay, now we're moving on to discipline techniques. There's 3 discipline techniques that were essentially identified by Grusek and Goodnow in 1994. So there's power assertion, inductive techniques, and withdrawal of love. Parents tend to use all 3 of these, but it usually depends on the situation, which I will discuss towards the end. But first, let's talk about power assertion. Power assertion is a use of authority in either physical or verbal means. Its primary purpose is to discourage undesirable behavior. So power assertion is anytime a parent uses their authority, anytime they use discipline in order to get what they want from the child. And this is primarily used to discourage undesirable behavior. So examples of power assertion are withdrawal of privileges, grounding, and spankings. Question: is timeouts power assertion, where you tell the child to go to the room and sit on the corner of the bed for 5 minutes, or even stand in the corner? The answer to that is yes, because is the parent using their authority to get the child to do what they want them to do with timeouts and standing in the corner? Yes. So that's power assertion. Inductive techniques. This is the use of reason and applying to the child's sense of fairness. So essentially it's talking with the child and helping them understand, and to get them to understand you have to use reason, and you have to apply to their sense of fairness. The main objective of inductive techniques is to induce desirable behaviors. So power assertion is what we would call a stop. Inductive techniques is what we would call a start. Stop bad behaviors, start good behaviors. The second objective with inductive techniques is to discourage undesirable behavior. So with inductive techniques, its primary purpose is to start desirable behaviors, and a second objective, kind of further down the line, would be to stop undesirable behavior. Examples: explaining and discussing limits and rules, getting ideas from the child, so such as what do you think should happen? What do you think would be a fair discipline? That would be kind of an inductive technique right there. But simply sitting and listening and talking to the child, that is overall inductive techniques. Then we have withdrawal of love. This is when the caretaker withholds their obvious affection and shows obvious displeasure with the child. So, example of withdrawal of love is the mean look, the cold shoulder, just flat out ignoring the child. Okay, so parents tend to use all three of these discipline techniques, but it depends on the situation. And what we mean by that is, well, for instance, when we want to teach our children something, such as to show concern for others, or not to be rude, or to teach table manners or proper etiquette, that is what we would use inductive reasoning for. For power assertion, we tend to use power assertion if someone or something is going to get hurt. Another example is, if you're not going to get a second chance. So, for instance, if your child almost runs out into traffic, I personally would not use inductive reasoning for that because I might not get a second chance. That's dangerous. So I would use power assertion. I might spank my child because I'd want my child to understand that is not acceptable. If I don't get a second chance, it might be a time to use power assertion. By the way, you don't need to know this for the test. A lot of this is coming out because, I'm a therapist and I work a lot with families. Power assertion isn't something that should be overused. If you find yourself relying too much on your authority, that could cause you problems down the road. So, for instance, if I spank my child for everything, and then I spank my child for the first time they run out in the middle of the road, the child has no way to differentiate getting spanked for not cleaning up his room versus something life-threatening such as running out into traffic and getting spanked for. If you don't use power assertion very much, when you do use it, you're really sending a signal to your child as, wow, this is serious. Okay, moving on, back to notes. This is important. You want to use power assertion and inductive reasoning to deal with such situations such as lying and stealing. Research has clearly shown that you can't address lying or stealing just with power assertion or with inductive reasoning. You really need to do both. Parents choose their strategy based on their belief on its effectiveness, but more so on their confidence in their ability to carry it out. So parents tend to choose their discipline technique on effectiveness, but more so on their confidence that they can carry it out. So this is why it's not uncommon to find fathers relying more on power assertion. Fathers being males, we're not enculturated to pay as much attention to emotions or the relationship as, say, females. So since we're kind of uncomfortable with relationships, and inductive reasoning requires sensitivity and understanding, a father might be more confident with using his authority, and so therefore would choose power assertion more. A mother, being a female, being enculturated to be more aware of feelings, put more of an emphasis on relationship, she might feel more comfortable in using inductive reasoning and not so much power assertion because she might not feel as confident with her authority. So, once again, parents choose their strategy based on their belief of effectiveness, but more so on their confidence, on their ability to carry it out. Okay, and this helps. All right, we did that to understand why fathers tend to use power assertion more than mothers. Okay, the goal of parenting is to have the child internalize parental teachings in the form of self-discipline. Essentially what that means is, black and white of it, is that we want our children to behave even when we aren't there to punish them. That's what we mean by internalizing and self-discipline, is that they behave even when they aren't going to get punished because the parents aren't around. What Grusek and Goodnow found, and we've known this for actually quite some time, getting children to internalize parental teaching depends on being warm and responsive. The warm and responsiveness is what really guides the discipline. Um, if I'm not warm and responsive, but I'm always disciplining, it's kind of like being a boss and just bossing my employees around and not caring about my employees. That's a bad boss, just like it would be a bad parent. So I want you to notice the tie-in back to this in Bob Ryan's parenting, as we saw authoritative, where you balance discipline with the relationship, is the best way to get a child to learn, to be responsible, to have good grades, to be social, to be friendly. So this all ties in together. Okay. So this is what I was talking about. Generally, it's the warmth and responsiveness that helps a child respect the control, the discipline of the parent. The boss example, as I mentioned before, if you have a boss that just looks at you as a warm body fulfilling a position, you're not going to be very fond of that boss. So therefore, if you do what you need to do, basically out of fear of consequences, you don't want to get fired because you need the money to pay the job, but you're not going to do anything extra. Why should you? But if you have a good, caring boss, like an authoritative parent would be, someone who does, you're not just a warm body doing a job, you're a person. And, I care and respect for that person. So I do expect you to do your job, and the consequences are still there. However, our relationship is going to motivate you to do a better job and maybe to do a little bit extra and to maybe help out. And why? Not because of fear of consequences like an authoritarian parent or authoritarian boss, but because of the relationship. So I hope this helps out. And that's it. Good luck with those quizzes.